Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? It's really easy to misinterpret each other, isn't it? One of the most perplexing yet fascinating things that I encountered when I started this dialogue on dark and disturbing games, role-playing games, dark and disturbing themes in role-playing games, was how often people kind of misunderstood what I was talking about. And I take the blame for that because maybe I wasn't always as clear as I should have been. So I want to talk about a little bit more, what I consider the compelling dark and disturbing themes, in the role-playing game experience. And of course, there's a certain part of it. Yeah, there's the obligatory, blood and guts and gore and that's kind of thing, and that can be fun and engaging, at the right time with the right people. And there's also that whole part of the terrifying otherworldly monster where you discover that you're not on top of the food chain. And anybody that's watched the movie Jaws and really thought about that for a while, that's kind of terrifying because we build this little bubble around ourselves in most of our societies. Live in the suburbs or whatever. Doesn't matter if you live in the suburb. You get what I'm talking about. Where we, kind of create this imagery of the world that's a safe space, and there's times when it's not, and something like that can really kind of challenge, our sense of security. So, to me, the situations would challenge our accepted norms, both societal norms, our own norms, would challenge like our place in the world, our importance, in the universe, our place in our sense of importance. Period. Our own personal beliefs threaten our understanding of the nature of reality, or the reality of nature, as the case may be. These things are far more interesting and compelling to me than the obviously horrifying and disturbing elements that you could throw in a role-playing game, like icky monsters and what have you. And so these are the things that I find myself most drawn to, and also the games that I've been most interested in lately. It's not I'm looking around saying I want a disturbing and dark game, but the games that kind of just grab me, like that's a really cool premise, often are kind of dark and disturbing to a certain degree, and they contain a lot of these elements that I'm going to talk about, and the elements I just kind of listed. So I want to just give you some examples from a few games. I made this video before, and I didn't really put too many examples in it, and I wasn't happy with it, so hopefully this video doesn't go too long. But I'm going to talk about a few games and maybe a couple pieces of literature really fast. The game Circle of Hands. That doesn't have a chapter on combat. It's a chapter on killing. And he makes no bones about it. You've made a conscious decision to kill another person. And, we kind of become inured into killing other people in role-playing games. It's all pretend. And that's not always a bad thing. It really isn't. I mean, there's games which are just kind of, you're more detached. It's more cinematic. It's more heroic. But this is gritty, up close and personal, in your face. It reminds me of that scene in Saving Private Ryan near the end of the movie where I think the guy's name is Mellish, the Jewish character. He gets in this brutal hand-to-hand combat with a Nazi soldier who ends up finally, driving a knife through his heart. And it is a horrifying scene to watch. It's one of the most difficult scenes in the whole movie to watch because they're looking into each other's eyes. It is horrific. It's that kind of element or theme that comes out in this game to me as you read it. It can be, it's disturbing just reading the game, for crying out loud. I like it. But there's other elements in that society that can be disturbing. The backdrop itself includes a society where things like brutality, oppression, small-scale genocide, because it's a clan-based society. Even things like rape, torture, starvation. These things all exist. They're part of the backdrop. It doesn't have to be part of the game. It doesn't have to happen to your character. But it's understood that that's the kind of world it is. And, your characters may be willing to accept that because they're just part of that society. What is it like being a person, for whom that is just the norm, that might walk by people that are starving or oppressed because they're going to do something else. Maybe they're higher social class because there's a social class system in this game. One thing it really doesn't have in there as a part of the backdrop is slavery, but there's other games that have that too, and that's just disturbing. And these things I think are disturbing the most to us because they're plausible. These things really happen. They have really happened in the past to a much greater degree, and they still happen, to a degree now in the world today. And that's horrifying. That's disturbing. That is something that we, that safe bubble that we erect for ourselves just gets a little bit, gets a little cracked. Because you start to come face to face with what other people and maybe even you are capable of, given the right circumstances. Another game like Broken Rooms, it has a different tack on it, but it kind of comes to that same end. There's a divergent event, so ends up being 12 parallel realities with our own, and each one of these worlds has had some kind of significant global event. And in some cases, it's now post-apocalyptic. One world an asteroid is hit, so there's very few people left, and it's very plausible. There's other worlds where we're engaged in a war with an invading alien species, and it's kind of a stalemate. A little less plausible. I'll talk about faster than light travel another time, or just light travel, but it very kind of Starship Troopers-esque, almost like Ender's Game-esque, if they were on the world. It's interesting. And you can go on and on with different worlds. There's worlds where ghosts are real now. There's a world where a black hole is coming, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Everybody knows they're going to die. It's the end of the world. So people are acting in these various worlds exactly how you would expect people to act, given these extreme sets of circumstances. A lot of times society is broken down in some manner, and sometimes completely, and people are just behaving in these ugly ways that reflect desperation, fanaticism in some cases, fatalism, the absence of any external controls, or the other extreme, like martial law. So just either no government or too much government. And this really just once again kind of challenges your basic assumptions about the inherent goodness of human nature, and it just lets you put you face to face with what people are capable of in the right set of circumstances. Kind of challenges your safe view of the world. And one of the other things that can be really disturbing in this game is that the characters in many cases are helpless to help these people. They can't really do anything to affect large-scale change. Unless you're a certain type of person, and it's only like 1% of the population, of which your characters are part of it. They have this hindbrain anomaly. I'm not going to go into the whole details. You can't take other peoples off these worlds that are starving, that are going to die no matter what happens. You can't do anything to save them. How does that feel? That's kind of this thing that you come face to face with in that game that gets really, really disturbing. And you discover, like, what are you capable of? What are you not capable of? What is it like to be that helpless? And also, like, do you get jaded? And your characters actually do get jaded in the game. They have this quality called distance. The more worlds you travel to, the more experienced your character gets and more powerful. They have this quality called distance where they, it does things for you, benefits. But part of it is you just don't relate to other people anymore. And they become less and less important to you. That's just kind of chilling all by itself. Lamentations of the Flame Princess, on the other hand, they had a free RPG Day module that James Edward Raggi IV wrote. It's probably 4 or 5 years ago now, called Better Than Any Man. And there's all kinds of horrifying things in that module. However, two things I'm thinking of, which are probably the most horrifying because, once again, they're plausible. There's a ritual kind of cannibalism as one cult, because it's like 30 Years of War Europe. And so whether or not that actually really existed in 30 Years of War Europe, not really sure, but that's what's existing there. Excuse me, I'll take a swig of some Diet A&W here. Got a little tickle in my throat. Just drink it right out of the bottle. But there's another part which is the most disturbing to me, and he even mentions that this is disturbing in both these cases. Witch has been hung in one village, and so now that the children of the village are invited to come and beat the body with sticks. This is stuff that really happened. This is just really chilling when it comes right down to it. Now, in other kinds of literature, but which we can find, these premises can find their ways into role-playing games. The book Hannibal. Really like that book. Whether or not you dig the story or not, it really isn't relevant at this point, because it's a channel about me and what I think. But he wrote that book well enough to kind of put you behind Hannibal's eyes, and as you read the book, he did a good enough job that you start to come around to Hannibal's viewpoint, and how he views people, how he lives his life, starts to make more and more sense. And all of a sudden you realize, man, that's very disturbing, because I'm starting to think like this guy. Or start to at least to agree with him. It starts to make a logical sense. He did a really good job with that. And sometimes games can do the same thing for us. There's a short story called Halt, Who Goes There? That is the actual inspiration for the John Carpenter's movie The Thing. And the horrifying part of that whole thing, it really isn't the blood and guts. It's that you can't trust anybody. Who is your friend and who isn't? Who's the monster? Take it out of that movie, that context, but it could be your partner, could be your child. And the 2011 version of The Thing kind of has this, whether or not you like that movie, there's this kind of vibe in there. Could be you. You may not know. That's just incredibly chilling. But just that whole paranoia, is really can be kind of really disturbing. I think, man, we don't give doppelgangers enough credit as being one of the most scariest creatures ever invented in the old version of the role-playing games. Something like Inception, the movie Inception, where you start to wonder, like, what is real? Are we really asleep? Is this That kind of stuff really grabs me. You know, I was listening to Robert the Narrator's video on Eclipse Phase, a game I really want to check out. But the thing that grabbed me right off the bat was this idea that you could maybe be reincarnated because you died. You get this chip out of your head and you can be rebooted. Or if you don't get the chip, you don't get all your memories. You just get your last upload. You go to the computer. Now you don't know what happened. How did you die? That to me is just very horrifying, but very compelling. I like that kind of idea. And video's going a little longer than I want to, but oh well. But the whole cosmic horror part of Lovecraft, that to me is much more compelling than the monsters. They're cool too. But that thing where it challenges our place in the universe, challenges our sense of significance, because we really get this look at like how insignificant we are, the nature of things like reality and madness. But just that, to me, things like that evoke that whole idea. Like, remember you're like probably about 5 years old, because that's when it usually happens, and you come to this realization that you're going to die one day. You're not going to be around forever. And then, later on in life, we all look up to the heavens at some point, and maybe do some research and find out that we are just this, small, insignificant little dot in a gigantic universe, and that's our planet. And then there's us. Things that really start to challenge, our sense of importance. Where the bottom just drops out from us and there's no handrails. And then throw on, some little things where everything you thought was real isn't real. Veil gets pulled back and there's Yog-Sothoth or God knows what. That to me is really compelling. Even things like the Matrix. What the heck's going on? That concept. And that happens actually in the game Broken Rooms. There's a point where they don't fill in all the dots. You're supposed to fill in the blanks as the game master. You're not really sure what is the real nature of reality here. Which is the real world? Is our world the real world or not? Like what is really going on? Because there's supposed to be other events that happen, and it's not really spelled out exactly what all this means. So even games like Circle of Hands, it's that kind of really like, what is this all really about with the magic that's going on there? And so I go on and on. I'm probably going on too much at this point anyway. But for me, at the end of the day, we tend to make this safe space for ourselves. We tell ourselves a story about how important we are, how safe the world is. We put this little bubble around ourselves, and these games or themes like that can really kind of challenge that, and I find that compelling. We come away, I think, looking at anything like that, with a different perspective. And by the same token, the whole idea where your character may take actions which you as a person may not feel comfortable doing. They may have to. What actions aren't they willing to take? And what do they witness? And how does that change them? These things, these concepts kind of draw me to role-playing games and other media. What about you? What concepts that you could call dark and disturbing kind of draw you to role-playing games? What games do you look at and say, hey, I got to play that? And you realize part of the reason you got to play that is because there's something in it that's dark and disturbing. What is that element?